What's up, heathens? How ya doing? Today we're continuing with the Matt Powell thing, but today is rather special because of this.
I believe if we study history, the Confederates were able to shoot pterodactyls, back in the Civil War, and they spread these things out. Anybody can look it up online. There's so much. And just the fact that we're finding, and not to change the subject, but just the fact that we're finding fossilized seashells up on the top of Mount Everest, that they're constantly finding these things, just shows that Mount Everest must have been covered with water at some point. So there is, there's evidence for a global flood. And so in order for something to fossilize, that it has to be covered with sediment quickly. What is the explanation?
Yes, Matt is going to get into his cryptozoology passion and how that apparently reinforces his whole idea that the Earth is 6,000 years old. And to answer his question about seashells on top of Mount Everest or whatnot, well, mountains form by, like the land pushing up and everything. And yeah, there probably was underwater at one time before Mount Everest formed, Matt. Anyways, if you want to see more of this discussion, then please stay tuned. You also earlier, which comes into my next point, stated like as a senior in college, this seems ridiculous to me. You've also used this kind of logic before when talking about like different people of authority. You seem to like to use like an appeal to authority to say that something is true, right, or correct. I mean, you use the Bible to say that the Bible is correct. So, which it would be circular reasoning. So I'm just kind of curious, like, why do you feel like authorities that agree with you are correct because they are authorities?
Well, I would say that the authorities, and the only reason I appeal to authority at times is because people look at these guys, they look at Bill Nye and they're like, oh man, he's so brilliant. And they look at these guys who profess themselves to be very wise. And they're like, oh man, they're just so smart. But Steve Hawking is like, yeah, because of laws such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. I mean, just stuff like this. And so what I do is I just take their quotes, present them to the audience, and sometimes I'll put a video together with all their different quotes. And I had one lady comment on my channel, oh my, I can't believe how bad you made these guys look. Well, it's what they're saying, and it's what they believe. And so that's where I'm coming from. So obviously I do believe there is a place, John, to appeal to authority to an extent, right? Because obviously we need to look at the evidence itself and make the decision for ourselves. But I do believe that for the viewer's sake, it's important to appeal to some authority and let them see what their heroes are saying.
Well, you understand that if you're putting together videos and you have people commenting like, oh, you made them look so bad, don't you see how that could be, which I haven't seen the video, so I don't know, but I mean, it sounds like quote mining to me.
Absolutely not. In fact, it's just, what do you mean by quote mining though?
Quote mining is taking a certain quote and presenting it out of context so that it seems to say something else when it really doesn't. When you take the quote into the full context, I mean, Christians usually like to use that whenever referencing something in the Bible that's particularly horrible, but I don't think that you're going to have a problem with that.
Sure. Well, I will say this, when it comes to quote mining, I try to be as honest as I can. I don't try to just, try to diss what they're saying. I don't try to be dishonest with the evidence. If they say something and they firmly believe that the universe, that time, space, and matter all came into being at once and that the Big Bang took place some but quite a few billion years ago, they believe that, and that's fine. But I think the burden of proof lies upon them. If you make a claim, that's why they call it the theory of evolution and the Big Bang theory. It's just a belief. It's a theory. It's a religion, and I believe that there's lies in these textbooks. I think the whole thing is propaganda. Like that's just me. I think it's all propaganda, man. And when it comes to this 97% of scientists believing in evolution, I don't believe that at all. I don't believe 97% of scientists believe in evolution. Because here's the thing. In order to get a job anywhere in our United States of America, you have to basically sign a waiver for the school stating that you will teach their curriculum, whether it's science, English, whatever. And if you disagree with the curriculum and if you're openly disagreeing with the curriculum and you're saying, hey, I'm going to teach my own thing, you're out of a job. So when somebody comes at me with, oh, well, 97% of academia believe in evolution, I think that's dumb and ridiculous, because a lot of these guys that I talk to, they're like, heavens no. The genomes are degrading. We're losing characteristics in DNA. Everything is winding down. That's what people tell me.
Okay, well, I mean, you did spout off a lot of things there, and as far as the teaching curriculum and whatnot, I mean, the curriculum is decided by, of course, boards and everything like that, and even I have a lot of problems with. Textbook information that actually gets pushed through. Like in Texas, they actually pushed through that Moses was a founding father of the United States. And I sincerely disagree with that. And I would say that I wouldn't teach that in a classroom. But then again, if I was a teacher and I disagreed with my state's own curriculum, I would go to another state that that was teaching the way that I wanted to teach. I mean, see, that's where you're a little limited when you do that. So I mean, what I would say is that the mainstream science, the science that has evidence behind it that can actually prove what it says without going through dubious experiments or misrepresenting information or anything like that, says that evolution happened. And it's not because mainstream science says it, it's because, like you said, 97% of scientists agree with the findings. The findings is the evidence of that. So it's the evidence that supports it, and not like, this appeal to authority or whatnot that a lot of people like to say. So I can sympathize, I guess, with the teachers out there that don't want to teach evolution. But then again, if you don't want to teach evolution, you do have options to go and teach at like a Christian school or whatever. If you're a science teacher and you don't want to teach evolution, maybe you should look into a different field, that you don't want to teach it, because this seems a little bit discriminatory, I guess, but at the same time, you have to understand that you are going against mainstream science. Like, for instance, if I was a history teacher teaching in high school, let's say first century Christianity, I could not stand up there and teach how Jesus is a mythical character and never existed on earth, because I'm a mythicist. I wouldn't go up there and teach that Jesus actually existed in history or anything like that, which I don't think that those particular classes are in high schools, but I'm just saying that putting myself in the position of a creationist biology teacher, you can't always teach your own personal beliefs because of the way that our school system is standardized.
Sure.
You also, I've got false dichotomy down here, because what you said was that, it's ridiculous that scientists say that, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old and the universe is 13.5 billion years old. And there's all these other things that make it ridiculous. So therefore, with how precisely tuned the universe is, therefore a creator had to be the one to create it, and it was your particular creator. So that kind of creates a false dichotomy, because for one thing, you're using your own personal incredulity in order to say that, oh, all of that's hogwash, when we have multiple lines of evidence that say that it's not hogwash. We have radioactive dating to show us how old the Earth is. We can radioactively date or we can perform radioactive dating on meteorites that strike the Earth from about the time that the Earth was formed, and that's how we can tell how old the Earth is, because it has a very distinct signature of what materials are in those meteorites, and that's just one way that we can do it. And then other ways are, whenever like a volcano erupts or whatnot and old rocks are thrown up, we can test those and see how old they are. If an old rock was really thrown up and we were able to test it and find out that it was 6 billion years old, then yes, our models would change. So I'm kind of curious, why do you disagree with changing? Because you seem to have a big problem with science finding new information and replacing old information with the newest of with the newly available information?
Well, first off, I'd like to state, and I know this is it's somewhat relevant. The Bible says, and this is where I'm coming from. The Bible had prophesied well before all this came about that there would be, he said, Timothy, avoid vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. So I believe that the Bible says that there's going to be a time when there's going to be a science, falsely so called, that comes out. And when I actually do the research and when I look into how these scientists are doing in conducting these experiments, I believe it's bogus. For example, carbon dating. They say, oh, we can use carbon dating to tell how old, certain things are. Well, sometimes they'll kill an animal, carbon date it the next day, and they carbon date it at like 8,000 years old. And they say, oh, well, that's just because, and a lot of critics, Steve McRae got on me for this. He's like, oh, that's only because they misapplied it. Well, here's the thing, they've carbon dated, and here's the thing about carbon dating too that they never talk about. Obviously things could be contaminated with other materials. If it's buried in sediment, it can get contaminated, obviously, with the floods, millions of years and all this stuff. And I understand carbon dating only goes back about 50,000 years, right?
Well, I mean, that's the limit for fairly accurate radiocarbon dating.
Sure. But to use that and say, well, we have proof that these, you can still carbon date these dinosaur bones that they've dug up that are still somewhat fresh, and these things carbon date as like recent deaths. They carbon date recently. And so the thing is to say, well, these things died out millions and millions of years ago. Not to mention, the pirates obviously saw these things. They have them sculpted on the edge of their pirate ships. Swords, back in, I believe it was 1971, that were discovered. I mean, just swords with dinosaurs carved out on them, brachiosauruses, completely matching the fossils that have been, discovered. All of these things point to the fact that these people had to have seen these creatures and observed these creatures, because it's not like it's like if I drew an alien perfectly and then all of a sudden, hey, I dig up one, people are going to be like, wow, did he actually see this? And the odds of drawing something like that consistently throughout history is very slim. And so that, I believe, points to the fact that these people did walk with dinosaurs, and the Bible says that out of his mouth go burning lamps and sparks of fire leap out. The dinosaurs they discovered have, the dragons they've discovered have chambers in the back of their head. That's where they can breathe fire. But that's just a couple things. I mean, I could go on and on for hours, John, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to eat up all your time, but I would like to hear your response to that, though.
Well, I mean, you can probably see the confusion on my face. For one thing, dinosaurs never breathe fire like dragons. I mean, I'm not exactly sure where you got that they have chambers in the back of their what the fuck ever, and they spout fire. Like I don't know where you're getting that. I haven't seen these swords that you're talking about. I do hear about Aztec pottery or these Indian pottery that has what it looks like to be dinosaurs on it. But what would I would say there is that it's coincidental for it. Like those aren't actually dinosaurs. Those were just bad drawings that look like dinosaurs to us now. That's not proof that dinosaurs actually lived.
So all of these discoveries of these stones that have been discovered, every single one of these, every different artist was just a bad artist.
Well, no. Well, I mean, compared to what we have now, obviously they were bad artists. But no, I'm saying that they drew like animals that they saw around them, and they weren't exactly representing them correctly. I mean, they have drawings of animals looking in very weird ways, all the way back in time. So it doesn't surprise me that they have drawings or little carvings or whatever that look similar, but they're not actually those. I mean, dinosaurs, dinosaur bones, we didn't have a concept of dinosaurs or that there was an apex creature on this planet before us until the 1800s. So I'm kind of curious, how do you explain the blackout of information from the time that I'm guessing, since you brought up dragons, you ascribe to Ken Ham's whole idea. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you explain the blackout of information? Because, I mean, if dinosaurs were a thing, and like we use them for transportation, or we had them around or whatnot. I'm kind of curious how you explain the fact that no cultures have dinosaurs just littered throughout it. Nobody's talking about dinosaurs. Nobody's talking about any of that stuff. There's nothing like in the artwork, which I know that you're bringing up artwork now, but like I explained, it was just those were things that looked very similar to dinosaurs, but were not actually dinosaurs.
So
So
two
what?
things. Okay, yeah, two things in response. Obviously, we are still seeing like the plesiosaur. People are still spotting those today. So those are still around, and those have been talked about throughout history. And not to, what's that?
No. Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay,
I didn't
yeah,
mean to
just your
interrupt.
response. But basically, you crack me up, man. I like the look of confusion. It's kind of funny, but at the same time, I mean, God bless you. You seem like a sincere guy. So basically, obviously, so you're asking me basically like how come it died out? How come nobody's talking about these dinosaurs? Well, here's the thing. If something dies out, for long enough, nobody's really going to talk about it. Obviously there's not going to be a ton of talk about these things. And the thing is, I do believe there was talk about these things. I believe if we study history, the Confederates were able to shoot pterodactyls, back in the Civil War, and they spread these things out. Anybody can look it up online. They spread these things out, and this is a historical fact. So, they spread this thing out, and it's got a huge wing length. There's a pterodactyl they shot. So, of course, these things have been around. Now, they went extinct, obviously, slowly, but surely. And so I don't believe that just because, at some point in time, coming from your perspective, that, just because they stopped talking about it means that they never saw it when we have all this evidence that they've seen it. Does that make sense? Like with the Ichthyoperuvian stones, just tons and tons of things, Viking ships. I mean, there's so much. And just the fact that we're finding, and not to change the subject, but just the fact that we're finding fossilized seashells up on the top of Mount Everest, that they're constantly finding these things, just shows that Mount Everest must have been covered with water at some point. So there is, there's evidence for a global flood. And so in order for something to fossilize, that it has to be covered with sediment quickly. What is the explanation for all of that? And obviously, I hope that answers your question. Obviously, I believe that these things died off. I don't think people necessarily stopped talking about them. Just because it wasn't recorded doesn't mean that they stopped talking about these things.
Well,
because if something goes extinct, obviously that somebody's not going to just draw a picture of it, because they're not going to have these things. So why would they? Really, the question comes, why would they? You know what I'm saying?
okay. Well, can you explain the dodo bird then? Like, do you know about the dodo bird, right? And its untimely end.
I can't say that I do.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's still being talked about, drawn about, and even, I'm fairly certain they have video games about it. But dodos were native to an island until, humans came and like clubbed them all to death, and now they're extinct. But I mean, they're a pretty well-known case of what happens when you don't regulate like hunting and all this other stuff. They're a pretty well-known case for extinction. Like we can manually extinct a species on the planet, and just because a species goes extinct doesn't mean that we don't talk about it. I mean, if a species goes extinct and we don't know that it went extinct, then of course we're not going to talk about it. But something as monumental as dinosaurs, I would think that we would talk about, because I mean, you've got T-Rexes, you've got Triceratops, you've got Velociraptors. I really don't know how we would actually survive with dinosaurs around, because if you really consider what T-Rexes do, have you seen Jurassic Park?
I love Jurassic Park.
Yeah, those dinosaurs fuck you up in Jurassic Park. They got a new one coming out this weekend. It is gonna fuck up everybody then too. Okay, so I really don't understand how you think that humans could survive with dinosaurs around.
Okay, I've got two objections to that. Obviously, a dinosaur isn't like an all-knowing creature. They only have so much space, so of course humans are going to survive. With these creatures, of course they're going to be fine. Obviously, people have gotten bit and killed by them, and the Ichthyoperuvian stones show people getting killed by these creatures. Depict these things. So obviously, and they were bigger than humans on the stones, which again shows that these things would have been big lizards. And they even have, obviously dinosaur skin has circular patterns in it. Obviously, they have circular patterns in the Peruvian stones, just showing, hey, it's like God's stamp, man, right on these Peruvian stones. So, but when it comes to, okay, you said that, well, why wasn't everybody talking about it at that time? Well, because they weren't in 2018 America when we had all this science. They weren't as fascinated by all this stuff. And the thing is, we live in a day and age now where everybody's fascinated by science, including myself. So that would be my response to that.
Okay, well, but I mean, you understand that, like, I mean, species that went extinct prior to the like 1865, prior to the Civil War, I mean, we would still know about those today. So I'm not really buying this whole, oh, they went extinct and we all just sort of forgot about the giant fucking lizard that chased Timmy down the street.
Well, no,
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, nobody forgot about these things. The Bible records them. Peruvian stones record them. History records them. And just because a 1 century doesn't record them doesn't mean that this didn't happen. And that just happens to be the century that these things went extinct in history. So it makes perfect sense to me.
Well, I mean, I get that it makes sense to you, but it actually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like you said that plesiosaurs are still being seen now. So, I mean, are you talking about the Loch Ness Monster? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, with the long neck, basically. Obviously, they're still being spotted.
I mean, you understand that the initial... I'm sorry, I was talking over you. What?
Oh, no, I was just going to say they're still being spotted. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, you understand that the initial photo of this Loch Ness Monster has actually been proven to be a hoax, that they didn't actually take a photograph of it. Any photos after that have also been proven to be hoaxes. So I don't know exactly where you're saying that you're seeing these things. Do you think that Bigfoot's real?
I don't believe so, no. I believe that the Bible says there was giants in the earth in those days, and I've seen a lot of things I've heard about a lot of things that have been recovered. Giant humans, basically. And I know that's a rabbit trail in and of itself. But when it comes to this issue with the plesiosaur, I believe it was World War II, they took the submarines through a certain lake, and they were able to record these flippers, and anybody can look it up, that match a plesiosaur. So I don't know how you can say that that's a fake, and I guess it really comes down to your sources. Obviously, with the first one, I have heard that some of those are made up. So I am aware of that. But when it comes to the World War II discovery that was made, and just other discoveries that are made all the time, obviously I believe that these things are still alive and that they roam the waters. And I don't think that you could fake a military camera, when these guys say, hey, we saw this.
Well, no. Do you know about the concept called pareidolia?
No. Honestly, John, I don't know a ton of technical terms. I'm very simple when it comes to science. I just enjoy simple science.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's not really all that simple. It's just, I guess, maybe one of those things that you don't know exists until you're told that it does. But pareidolia is this thing where your brain sees patterns in random noise. So, I mean, if we were to go with, your camera that took a picture of this plesiosaur flipper, if we were to take the logic that you use there, minus the pareidolia aspect, would you say that helicopters have faces?
Sure. I can see the logic you're applying, but this was a double set of flippers, though. And most sea roaming creatures don't have the double set of flippers. So,
well, yeah, but no, but I mean, I'm specifically, I mean, you understand how pareidolia makes you see like shapes or patterns where there are no patterns. So I haven't seen these photos that you're talking about, but given the fact that dinosaurs and plesiosaurs are long extinct, my first bet would be to go to, oh, this is pareidolia. It's a trick of the light that makes it seem like there are flippers or whatnot. It could also be other different things like sea lions or whatever. I don't know the area in which they went through or whatnot, but I'm saying that there's a lot of things that it could end up being down there. Like, I mean, you don't believe every single photo you see on the internet. Like, you wouldn't believe a head that's strapped to 18-legged, I don't know, body of whatever flesh. Yeah, I'm assuming that you wouldn't trust that as oh, hey, look, this is evidence of spider people.
No, but I mean, most evolution, actually, pretty much all evolutionists believe that we are related to spiders in some sense. So, sure, I mean, obviously, I don't look at photos and say, hey, and, I mean, just the fact that people believe that we're related to these creatures, just it blows my mind. And like, I was on edge about evolution for a long time when I was younger, because I'm like, well, is the Earth millions of years old, or is it 6,000 years old approximately? What are we looking at? And I'm thinking to myself, man, this is just, and as I started to study it, I'm thinking, man, it's crazy to even think of believing this, even though I had an open mind to it at one point in time. Now, am I still open-minded to the evidence? Absolutely. Like, I am a very open-minded person. And if somebody shows me evidence, which I don't believe can be done, showing that the Earth is billions of years old personally, then I would believe it. But the thing is, that's like asking me, hey, could you jump to the sky and hit your head on a cloud and come back down? That's the kind of same logic that goes behind it in my mind. So I think evolution's just silly.
Okay, but I mean, you have no evidence to say that evolution is silly.
I have you.
Thank you, heathens, for making it to the end. I really appreciate it. If you will, go down below with your comment about how crazy as fuck Matt is. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of weird ass shit. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice, and I will see you heathens later.